The worn stage planks creaked under her boots as Adelaide Kane adjusted the battered guitar against her hip, fingers trembling despite the August heat that shimmered across Fort McDowell's dusty Main Street in the Arizona Territory. She had sold her mother's wedding ring 3 days ago for food, and now this instrument was all she had left besides the faded calico dress that hung loose on her frame, and the voice that her father once said could make angels weep. The saloon owner, a thick-necked man named Garrison who smelled of cigar smoke and whiskey, had offered her this. Sing on the crude wooden platform outside his establishment, and she could keep whatever coins passers-by tossed into the dented tin cup at her feet. No guarantee, no protection, just her voice against the harsh world of 1883 Arizona. Adelaide strummed the first chord, her fingers finding the familiar pattern despite the desert sun beating down on her bare head. She had lost her bonnet somewhere between Tucson and here, during those desperate weeks after her father's freight wagon had overturned in a flash flood, leaving her orphaned and penniless at 19 years old. The song that emerged was one her mother had taught her, a ballad about lost love and prairie winds, and she poured every ounce of longing into the melody. A few miners stumbled past, too drunk to notice. A woman in a burgundy dress hurried by with her children, shooting Adelaide a look that mixed pity with contempt. But then a single coin clinked into the cup, then another, and Adelaide kept singing because there was nothing else to do, nowhere else to go. She did not notice the cowboy at first. Wade Vance had ridden into Fort McDowell that morning with dust caked on his clothes and 3 months of trail wages in his pocket. He had been pushing cattle from Texas to the railroad in New Mexico, and his body ached from the endless days in the saddle. All he wanted was a hot meal, a bath, and a bed that did not move beneath him. But when he heard that voice carrying across the street as he tied his horse outside the general store, something made him stop. The woman singing was thin, too thin, with honey-colored hair that fell past her shoulders in waves that caught the sunlight. Her dress had been mended multiple times, and her face bore the kind of weariness that spoke of genuine hardship. But her voice was pure and clear, cutting through the afternoon heat like water through parched earth. Wade found himself walking closer, his spurs jingling softly with each step. He leaned against a post near enough to hear properly, but far enough not to intrude. When she finished the song, he pulled a silver dollar from his pocket and dropped it into her cup, watching surprise flash across her delicate features. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly, her green eyes meeting his for just a moment before she looked away. He touched the brim of his hat and walked on, but the sound of her voice stayed with him through his errands, through his bath at the barber's, through his steak dinner at the hotel restaurant. That evening, as the sun painted the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, he found himself drawn back to the same spot. She was still there, still singing, though her voice carried a note of exhaustion now. The tin cup held perhaps $3 in coins, and Wade wondered if that was enough for her to eat, to find shelter for the night. He listened to 3 more songs, each one revealing new depths of emotion, before he added another silver dollar to her collection. This time she looked at him longer, curiosity mixing with the wariness in her eyes. "You have a beautiful voice, miss," Wade said, the words coming out rougher than he intended. He was better with horses than conversation. "You are kind to say so," Adelaide replied, her fingers stilling on the guitar strings. Up close, Wade could see the hollows beneath her cheekbones, the way her dress hung on her small frame. "Have you eaten today?" The question escaped before he could think better of it. Adelaide stiffened, pride flashing across her face. "I can take care of myself, sir." Did not mean to suggest otherwise, Just that I noticed you have been singing since this morning, and the sun's setting now." Wade shifted his weight, aware that he was probably making things worse. "Name's Wade Vance. I push cattle for a living, and I meant no disrespect." She studied him for a long moment, taking in his weathered face, the honest concern in his blue eyes, the way he held himself with the quiet confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. He looked to be perhaps 25, with sun-darkened skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. "Adelaide Kane," she said finally. "And no, I have not eaten since yesterday, but I have almost enough here for a room and a meal, so I will be fine." Wade counted the coins in the cup with a practiced glance. Maybe $4 total. A room at the cheapest boarding house would cost at least $2, a meal another $1. That left almost nothing for tomorrow. "The hotel restaurant makes a fine pot roast," he said carefully. "I would be honored if you would join me for supper, Miss Kane. No strings, just a meal between two people far from home." Adelaide wanted to refuse. She had learned to be suspicious of kindness, especially from men. But her stomach ached with hunger, and something about this cowboy seemed genuine. He had not leered or made crude suggestions like so many others. He simply stood there, hat in hand, waiting for her answer with patient courtesy. "I would appreciate that, Mr. Vance," she said finally, gathering her coins and guitar. "But I must insist on paying my own way as soon as I am able." "Fair enough," Wade agreed, though he had no intention of letting her repay him. The hotel restaurant was nothing fancy, just simple tables covered in red checkered cloth and oil lamps providing warm light against the growing darkness outside. Wade ordered the pot roast for both of them, along with bread, coffee, and apple pie. When the food arrived, Adelaide had to force herself not to eat too quickly, to maintain some semblance of dignity even as her body screamed for sustenance. Wade pretended not to notice, keeping up a steady stream of conversation about neutral topics. He told her about the cattle drive, about growing up on a small ranch in Texas that his father had lost to debt and drought. He mentioned that he was hoping to save enough to buy land of his own someday, maybe here in Arizona where the territory was still opening up. "What about you?" he asked gently. "How did you end up singing for coins in Fort McDowell?" Adelaide set down her fork, the weight of recent events pressing down on her. "My father was a freight hauler. We were traveling from California to Tucson when we hit a flash flood 3 weeks ago. The wagon overturned. He did not survive." "I am sorry," Wade said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made Adelaide's throat tighten. "I had nothing left except the guitar and a few dollars. Made it to Fort McDowell hoping to find work, but no one wants to hire a woman with no skills besides singing." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out pretty songs do not pay much." "Your voice is more than pretty songs," Wade said firmly. "I have been all over this territory, heard plenty of saloon singers and music hall performers. You have something special, Miss Kane. Real talent." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. "Talent does not fill my stomach or put a roof over my head, Mr. Vance." They finished the meal in companionable silence, and Wade walked her to a respectable boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. He paid for a week's lodging before Adelaide could protest, holding up a hand when she started to object. "Consider it an investment," he said. "You keep singing, build up a following, and pay me back when you can. Deal?" Adelaide knew she should refuse, knew that accepting this much help from a stranger was dangerous. But the alternative was sleeping in an alley or worse, and something about Wade Vance made her want to trust him. "Deal," she whispered. The next evening, Wade returned to listen to her sing. And the evening after that. Each night he added coins to her cup, sometimes silver dollars, sometimes smaller change mixed in so it would not be obvious he was supporting her. Other people began to stop and listen too, drawn by her voice and the sight of the tall cowboy who stood guard nearby, his presence keeping the drunks and troublemakers at a respectful distance. Adelaide found herself singing with more confidence, her voice growing stronger as regular meals and safe shelter restored her strength. She learned to read the crowd, choosing songs that matched the mood of the evening. Lively tunes when miners came to town with fresh pay, melancholy ballads when the desert wind blew lonesome across the scrubland. And every night, Wade listened. Sometimes they would share a meal after she finished, sitting in the hotel restaurant or occasionally on the bench outside the boarding house, talking until the stars filled the sky. Adelaide learned that Wade had been working cattle drives since he was 16, that he had a younger sister married to a rancher in Texas, that his favorite food was his mother's cornbread, though she had died when he was 12. Wade learned that Adelaide had grown up traveling with her father, that her mother had died giving birth to a stillborn son when Adelaide was 10, that she had been educated by a succession of school teachers her father had hired in various towns. She knew Shakespeare and could cipher numbers better than most men, but those skills meant nothing in a world that judged women by their marriageability and connections. "You ever think about settling down?" Wade asked one night, the question casual but his tone suggesting it mattered. "I used to," Adelaide admitted. "When I was younger, I imagined I would marry someone kind, have a house with a garden, maybe children someday. But my father needed me and we were always moving. And now—" She gestured at herself, at the situation she found herself in. "Who would want a penniless woman who sings for coins?" "Someone with sense," Wade said quietly. "Someone who could see past circumstances to the person underneath." Adelaide looked at him sharply, but his face revealed nothing except honest sincerity. Her heart did something complicated in her chest, a flutter of feeling she was not quite ready to name. As the weeks passed, Fort McDowell began to recognize the nightly ritual. The singer and her cowboy, people called them, though Wade always maintained a respectful distance in public. Adelaide's tin cup began to fill more quickly as she gained a reputation, and she was able to pay Mrs. Patterson for her room and even buy herself a new dress, a simple but pretty blue cotton that made her eyes look like emeralds. Wade noticed the dress immediately. "You look lovely, Miss Kane," he said, and the warmth in his eyes made Adelaide's cheeks flush. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said, pressing an envelope into his hands. "It is not all I owe you, but it is a start." Wade opened the envelope to find $20, probably most of what she had saved. He tried to give it back. "You need this more than I do. Save it for your future." "My future is not so uncertain anymore, thanks to you," Adelaide insisted. "Please, Mr. Vance, let me have my pride in this." He accepted the money reluctantly, knowing that refusing would hurt her more than the money meant to him. "Only if you start calling me Wade. We have known each other more than a month now, and I think we can dispense with the formalities." "Then you must call me Adelaide," she replied, smiling in a way that made Wade's heart hammer against his ribs. That night, as Adelaide sang a love song about a cowboy and a prairie rose, Wade realized he was in trouble. Somewhere between that first evening and now, he had fallen completely in love with this brave, talented woman. The way she tilted her head when she concentrated on a difficult note, the quiet strength that had allowed her to survive loss and hardship, the genuine kindness she showed to children who stopped to listen, even the stubborn pride that made her insist on repaying debts she did not really owe. He wanted to court her properly, to offer her not just friendship but a future. But what did he have to offer? He was a drifter with a few $100s saved and dreams of land that might never materialize. Adelaide deserved better than a cowboy who smelled of horses and spent months at a time sleeping on hard ground. Still, when she finished her final song that night and met his eyes across the dispersing crowd, Wade felt hope kindle in his chest. The way she looked at him lately, with warmth and trust and something that might be affection, made him think that maybe his circumstances did not matter as much as he feared. "Walk with me," Adelaide asked when she had collected her coins and guitar. This was new. Usually he walked her back to the boarding house, but she had never explicitly invited his company. "I would like that," Wade said, offering his arm. They strolled down Fort McDowell's Main Street, past the general store and the blacksmith shop, past the church with its simple white steeple, and the schoolhouse that sat empty in the darkness. The September night was finally cooling after the brutal heat of day, and Adelaide breathed deeply of the desert air. "I have been thinking," she began, then paused as if gathering courage. "About what comes next. For me, I mean." Wade waited, letting her find her words. "I cannot sing on a street corner forever," Adelaide continued. "Mrs. Patterson has been kind, but Fort McDowell is small. There is a limit to how much I can earn here." She looked up at him, her face serious in the moonlight. "I thought perhaps I might try to get work singing in a proper establishment, maybe in Tucson or Phoenix." The thought of Adelaide leaving made Wade's chest tighten painfully. "Those cities can be rough for a woman alone." "I know, but what choice do I have? I need to build a real life, Wade. Find a way to support myself long term." Her voice wavered slightly. "Unless you think I should stay here." There it was, the question beneath the question. Wade stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Behind them, the lights of the saloon spilled golden across the dirt street, and somewhere a piano played a tinny melody. "I think," Wade said slowly, "that you should do whatever makes you happy, but I also think that maybe, if you were willing, there might be another option." Adelaide's breath caught. "What option?" "I have been saving for years. I have enough now to buy a piece of land, nothing fancy but enough for a small ranch. With hard work and luck I could build something real, a home, a future." He took her hands, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I know I am just a cowboy. I cannot offer you luxury or an easy life. But I can promise you that I would work every day to make you happy, to give you the security you deserve." "Wade," Adelaide whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "Let me court you properly, Adelaide. Let me prove that I can be the man you need. And if, after a time, you find that you care for me even half as much as I care for you, then maybe we could build that future together." Adelaide had spent so many weeks being practical, being careful, protecting herself against further hurt. But standing here with Wade's honest eyes looking into hers, feeling the warmth of his hands and the sincerity of his words, she felt something inside her unlock. "You do not need to prove anything to me," she said softly. "You have been proving it every day since we met. The way you have protected me, respected me, treated me like I matter. Wade, I care for you more than half. I care for you entirely." The smile that broke across Wade's face was like sunrise. "You mean that?" "I mean it," Adelaide said, and then she was in his arms and he was holding her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. They stood there in the middle of the street, wrapped in each other, while the stars wheeled overhead and the desert night sang its ancient song. The courting that followed was sweet and serious. Wade found work at a nearby ranch, breaking horses and mending fences, steady work that kept him in Fort McDowell instead of following the cattle trails. Adelaide continued singing, but now she sang with joy radiating from every note, her happiness apparent to everyone who listened. Mrs. Patterson chaperoned their evening walks and approved of Wade's intentions. "That boy looks at you like you hung the moon," she told Adelaide one morning over breakfast. "You could do far worse, and I do not think you could do better." Adelaide knew she was right. Wade was everything she had dreamed of in those girlish fantasies, and more than she had dared to hope for when her world fell apart. He made her laugh with stories from the cattle trails, listened attentively when she talked about her dreams, and treated her with a respect that went bone deep. On a crisp October evening, as Adelaide prepared to sing her nightly songs, Wade appeared in his Sunday best, his hair still damp from washing, his face freshly shaved. Adelaide looked at him curiously, noting the nervous energy in his movements. "I thought we might do something different tonight," Wade said, his voice slightly strained. "Different how?" Adelaide asked, intrigued. "Come with me." He offered his hand, and Adelaide set down her guitar, letting him lead her away from her usual spot on the platform. They walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open desert. The sun was setting in spectacular fashion, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold that made the cacti stand out in sharp relief. Wade had spread a blanket on the ground, and Adelaide noticed a small basket sitting in the center. "Wade Vance, are you trying to be romantic?" she teased, but her heart was pounding. "Trying being the key word," he admitted. "I am not much good at this sort of thing." They sat on the blanket, and Wade unpacked the basket to reveal fresh bread, cheese, apples, and even a small bottle of wine. It was simple fare, but the effort behind it touched Adelaide deeply. "This is perfect," she said softly. They ate as the sun sank below the horizon, talking about everything and nothing. Wade told her he had found a piece of land for sale, 200 acres with a creek running through it, about 10 miles south of Fort McDowell. The owner was willing to sell for a fair price, and Wade had almost enough saved. "I rode out to see it last week," he said, his enthusiasm evident. "Good grass for cattle, plenty of water, space for a house and barn. I kept imagining what it could be, Adelaide, what we could make it together." "Tell me," Adelaide urged, leaning against his shoulder. "A ranch house with a wide porch where you could sit in the evenings. A parlor with a piano if we could afford one, so you could play and sing whenever you wanted. Bedrooms for children if God blesses us with them. A garden for vegetables, maybe some chickens, definitely horses. A good life, Adelaide, simple but ours." Adelaide closed her eyes, seeing the vision he painted. It was everything she wanted, everything she had stopped letting herself dream about. "It sounds like heaven," she whispered. Wade shifted, and Adelaide opened her eyes to find him kneeling on the blanket before her, a small box in his hands. Her breath stopped. "Adelaide Kane, I am just a cowboy. I cannot offer you fancy things or big city excitement. But I can offer you my whole heart, every bit of it for as long as I live. I promise to work hard to give you the life you deserve, to respect and cherish you, to stand by you in good times and bad." His voice shook slightly. "Will you marry me? Will you build that future with me?" Adelaide looked at the man kneeling before her, this good, honest man who had appeared in her darkest hour and lit up her world with kindness and love. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, her voice breaking as she said, "Yes, yes, Wade, I will marry you." The ring was simple, a thin gold band with a small chip of turquoise, but it fit perfectly when Wade slipped it onto her finger. Then he was holding her again, and she was laughing and crying at the same time, feeling the solid warmth of him and the promise of everything to come. "I love you," Adelaide said, the words tumbling out. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Wade replied, his voice rough with emotion. "From the first time I heard you sing, Adelaide, something in your voice reached right into my chest and grabbed hold of my heart." They kissed as the stars emerged overhead, a sweet, tender kiss that spoke of promises and hope and a future they would build together. When they finally pulled apart, Adelaide was smiling so wide her face hurt. "Should we tell Mrs. Patterson?" she asked, looking at the ring on her finger and feeling giddy with happiness. "We should tell everyone," Wade declared. "I want the whole territory to know you agreed to be my wife." They walked back into town hand in hand, and by morning the news had spread through Fort McDowell like wildfire. The singer and her cowboy were getting married. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears and immediately began planning, insisting that Adelaide would have a proper wedding even if they had to make do with simple materials. The ceremony took place 3 weeks later in the small white church, on a November morning when the desert air was crisp and clean. Adelaide wore a new dress that Mrs. Patterson and several other women had helped her sew, white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Wade stood at the altar in his best clothes, looking nervous and proud and so handsome that Adelaide's heart swelled. Half the town attended, cramming into the church pews. The circuit preacher had arrived the day before, a lucky coincidence that meant they did not have to wait for the next time he passed through. Adelaide carried a small bouquet of desert wildflowers, and Mrs. Patterson served as her matron of honor while Wade's boss from the ranch stood up with him. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Adelaide's voice only shook slightly as she repeated her vows, promising to love and honor Wade for all her days. Wade's voice was steady and sure, his eyes never leaving her face as he pledged his life to hers. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed Adelaide with such tender joy that several women in the congregation sniffled into their handkerchiefs. The celebration afterward was held at the saloon, with Garrison grudgingly allowing them to use his establishment for dancing and toasts. Adelaide sang that evening, but not for coins. She sang for joy, for love, for the community that had witnessed their union. Wade held her close during the slow dances, and Adelaide felt safer and happier than she had since before her father died. No, she realized, happier than she had ever been, because this was her choice, her love, her future. They spent their wedding night in the hotel's best room, which was still modest by most standards but felt luxurious to them. Wade was gentle and patient, treating Adelaide with reverence that made her fall even more deeply in love with him. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking about the ranch and their plans until exhaustion finally claimed them. The next morning, they loaded Adelaide's few possessions into a wagon Wade had borrowed and set out for the land he had purchased. The 200 acres looked rough and wild when they arrived, with scrub, brush, and cacti dotting the landscape, and the creek running clear and cold through the center. But Adelaide could see what Wade saw: potential. They lived in a tent for the first month while Wade built a simple cabin, working from dawn to dusk with determination that left him exhausted each night. Adelaide helped where she could, gathering stones for the fireplace, preparing meals over an open fire, fetching water from the creek. It was hard work, harder than anything she had done before, but they were building their home with their own hands, and that made every blister and aching muscle worth it. By Christmas, the cabin was finished. Just 2 rooms initially, a main living area and a bedroom, but it was solid and weatherproof with glass windows Wade had bought in Tucson, and a door that hung straight on its hinges. Adelaide cried when she saw the finished product, overwhelmed by what they had accomplished together. Wade had one more surprise. He went to Tucson without telling her why, returning with a small upright piano that had seen better days but was still functional. It took 4 men to get it into the cabin, and Adelaide gasped when she saw it. "Wade, we cannot afford this," she protested, even as her fingers itched to touch the keys. "It is an early anniversary present," Wade said, grinning at her reaction. "The man at the music store was selling it cheap because one leg is cracked, but I already fixed it. I know it is not as good as what you deserve, but I wanted you to have music in our home." Adelaide threw her arms around his neck, kissing him soundly. "It is perfect. You are perfect." That evening, she played and sang while Wade sat in the chair he had built, watching her with such love in his eyes that Adelaide had to stop mid-song to kiss him again. The first year of their marriage was filled with hard work and simple happiness. Wade built a barn and a chicken coop, bought a few head of cattle to start a herd, and broke a pair of horses to help work the land. Adelaide planted a garden that flourished in the desert soil, kept the cabin clean and comfortable, and learned to cook heartier meals suited to a rancher's appetite. On Saturday evenings, they would ride into Fort McDowell together, and Adelaide would sing outside the saloon like old times, though now the coins went into a jar they were saving for improvements to the ranch. Wade still listened to every performance, still stood where she could see him, though now she wore his ring and everyone knew she sang for him as much as for the coins. In the spring, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. She told Wade one evening after supper, watching his face transform from confusion to understanding to pure elation. "A baby," he said, his voice awed. "We are going to have a baby." "In the fall, the doctor thinks," Adelaide confirmed, laughing as Wade swept her into his arms, spinning her around the cabin before setting her down carefully as if she might break. "I am going to be a father," Wade said wonderingly. Then fear crossed his face. "Are you all right? Is there anything you need? Should you be resting?" "I am fine," Adelaide assured him, touched by his concern. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Wade. I am strong and healthy, and Dr. Morrison said everything looks normal." Still, Wade hovered over her for the next months, insisting she not overexert herself, bringing her water and pillows, building an addition to the cabin so their child would have a proper nursery. Adelaide found his protectiveness both amusing and endearing, though she occasionally had to remind him that pregnancy was not an illness. She continued singing in Fort McDowell through the summer, her voice growing richer as her body changed. When she could no longer make the ride comfortably, Wade brought her guitar to the cabin porch, and she sang for him and the desert sky and the child growing inside her. Their son was born on a cool October evening, arriving with strong lungs and a healthy appetite. They named him William after Wade's father, and Wade held the tiny bundle with shaking hands and tears streaming down his weathered face. "He is perfect," Wade whispered. "Adelaide, you are amazing. Thank you. Thank you for him, for this, for everything." Adelaide, exhausted but glowing, watched her husband cradle their son and felt her heart expand until she thought it might burst. This was what happiness looked like, she realized. Not fancy things or easy living, but this. A good man holding their child, a home they had built with their own hands, a future stretching out before them full of possibility. William grew quickly, thriving in the clean desert air. He had Wade's dark hair and Adelaide's green eyes, and both parents doted on him shamelessly. Wade would take the baby with him when he did chores, talking to William about horses and cattle as if the infant could understand every word. Adelaide sang lullabies that made their son coo and smile, already responding to music the way she had. As William learned to walk and talk, Wade expanded the ranch, buying more cattle and hiring a couple of hands to help during busy seasons. Adelaide's garden grew larger, and she began selling vegetables in Fort McDowell, adding to their income. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. On their 5th anniversary, Wade took Adelaide back to the spot where he had proposed. They left William with Mrs. Patterson, who had become an honorary grandmother and rode out into the desert at sunset. The blanket was still the same one, though more worn now, and Wade once again produced a small basket. "I wanted to remind you," he said as they sat watching the sky turn crimson, "of where we started. 5 years ago, Adelaide, you made me the happiest man alive when you agreed to marry me." "Only 5 years," Adelaide marveled. "It feels like you have always been part of my life, like I cannot remember who I was before you." "A brave woman singing for coins," Wade said. "A woman who survived loss and hardship with grace and courage." "I fell in love with that woman, Adelaide, and I fall more in love with you every single day." Adelaide kissed him, tasting the salt and sun on his lips. "I was so lost when you found me. I did not know how I would survive, let alone build a life worth living. You gave me everything, Wade. Home, family, love, security. You saved me." "No," Wade said firmly. "We saved each other. You gave me purpose, Adelaide. Before you, I was just drifting, working drives and dreaming about a future I did not really believe in. You made it real. You made everything real." They made love under the stars, familiar and passionate after 5 years of marriage, then lay wrapped together talking about their dreams. Wade wanted to expand the ranch further, maybe hire more hands permanently, build up a herd that would provide for them and their children. Adelaide wanted more babies if God blessed them, wanted to see the ranch prosper, wanted to grow old watching sunsets with the man she loved. 2 years later, Adelaide gave birth to twin daughters, Catherine and Elizabeth, who arrived squalling and healthy on a spring morning that saw Wade nearly faint from anxiety. William, now 7 years old, took his role as big brother seriously, hovering over the cradles and reporting every tiny movement to his parents. The cabin had grown over the years, now boasting 4 bedrooms, a proper parlor with Adelaide's piano, and a large kitchen where the family gathered for meals. Wade had built a porch that wrapped around 3 sides of the house, perfect for watching sunsets and letting Adelaide sing in the cool evening air. The ranch was prospering too. Wade had earned a reputation for breeding quality horses, and buyers came from as far as Phoenix to purchase his stock. The cattle herd had grown to nearly 200 head, and Wade employed 3 full-time hands plus seasonal workers during roundup and branding. Adelaide still sang, though no longer for coins. She sang in church on Sundays, sang to her children at bedtime, sang while she worked in the garden or kneaded bread in the kitchen. Her voice had matured over the years, gaining depth and richness that made even simple songs sound profound. Sometimes on Saturday evenings, they would all ride into Fort McDowell. Wade would conduct business while Adelaide visited with friends, and occasionally she would sing outside the saloon for old time's sake, though now she donated the coins to the church fund for a new schoolhouse. People would gather to listen, and always Wade would be there, watching with the same rapt attention he had shown that first night 9 years ago. "You still listening like it is the first time you heard me," Adelaide teased him once. "That is because every time feels like the first time," Wade replied. "Your voice still does something to me, Adelaide, still reaches right into my chest and grabs hold." Their love had deepened and matured along with their voices and bodies. They knew each other's rhythms now, could communicate with a look across a crowded room, anticipated each other's needs without having to ask. But the passion remained too, burning steady and warm through the years, evident in the way Wade's hand always found Adelaide's, the way she would lean into him when they sat together on the porch watching the stars. When William was 12, old enough to take on real responsibility around the ranch, Wade finally taught him to ride properly. Adelaide watched them together, her husband and son, and felt tears gather in her eyes. Wade was patient and encouraging, just as he was with everything, and William soaked up his father's teachings like desert sand soaking up rain. The twins, now 5 years old, followed Adelaide everywhere, chattering constantly and singing the songs she taught them. They had Wade's dark hair but Adelaide's features, and already showed signs of inheriting her musical talent. Wade built them a small playhouse near the main cabin, and Adelaide would often find all 3 children there, William telling stories while his sisters listened with wide eyes. In 1895, Arizona was changing. Rumors of statehood circulated, though it would be years yet before that dream was realized. Railroads were pushing across the territory, bringing new settlers and new opportunities. Fort McDowell had grown from a dusty frontier outpost into a proper town with multiple stores, a bank, a real school, and even a small hotel that was not falling apart. Wade and Adelaide's ranch had grown too, now encompassing 500 acres and supporting a herd of 400 cattle plus the horses that Wade bred and trained. They employed 8 full-time hands, and Wade had built additional housing for married workers who wanted to bring their families. It was a real enterprise now, successful enough that Wade could afford to hire a foreman to handle day-to-day operations while he focused on breeding stock and business development. Adelaide had started teaching piano and singing to children in the area, holding lessons twice a week in their parlor. She loved sharing her gift with the next generation, seeing young faces light up when they mastered a difficult piece or hit a challenging note. On their 10th anniversary, Wade surprised Adelaide with a trip to Phoenix. Mrs. Patterson agreed to watch the children, and Wade and Adelaide took the train, luxuriating in the speed and comfort compared to the long wagon rides they had endured years before. In Phoenix, Wade took Adelaide to a real concert hall where a touring opera company was performing. Adelaide sat in the velvet seat holding Wade's hand, listening to the trained voices echoing through the grand space, and felt overwhelmed by how far they had come from that dusty street corner where she had sung for coins. "You ever miss it?" Wade asked later as they walked through Phoenix's gaslit streets. "The performing, I mean. Having that be your life," Adelaide considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I wonder what might have been if I had pursued it professionally. But no, I do not miss it, not really. What I have is so much better than any stage, Wade. I sing for people I love in a home we built together. That is worth more than any amount of applause. You could still perform, you know," Wade said. "Fort McDowell's talking about building a proper music hall. I am sure they would want you to sing there." "Maybe occasionally," Adelaide agreed, "but my priority is our family, our home. The children are growing so fast, Wade. I do not want to miss any of it chasing dreams I have outgrown." Wade pulled her close, kissing her temple. "You are an amazing mother, Adelaide, and an amazing wife. I am the luckiest man alive." "We are both lucky," Adelaide corrected. "Lucky we found each other when we did, lucky we took a chance on love." They spent 3 days in Phoenix, staying in a fine hotel and eating at restaurants, attending the opera and even a play. But both were eager to return home, to their children and their ranch and the life they had built. Luxury was nice for a visit, but their hearts belonged to the desert and the simple rhythms of ranch life. William turned 13 that fall, already showing signs of the man he would become. Tall like his father, with his mother's quick intelligence and a natural way with animals that made Wade proud. He had started attending the school in Fort McDowell, riding there each morning and working with his father in the afternoons and weekends. The twins were 7 now, distinct personalities emerging from their early sameness. Catherine was bold and adventurous, constantly climbing trees and begging to help with the horses. Elizabeth was quieter, more thoughtful, with a gift for drawing that Adelaide encouraged by buying her sketchbooks and pencils from the general store. Adelaide gave birth to their fourth child, another son they named Thomas, in the spring of 1897. At 33, the pregnancy was harder than the previous ones, and Wade worried constantly despite Dr. Morrison's assurances that everything was progressing normally. But Thomas arrived healthy and strong, with Wade's blue eyes and a calm temperament that made him an easy baby. "I think 4 is a good number," Adelaide said a few weeks after Thomas's birth, exhausted but content as she nursed their son while Wade sat beside her on the bed. "Whatever you want, love," Wade agreed. "You have given me more than I ever dreamed of." 4 healthy children, a beautiful home, a successful ranch. I could not ask for anything more. "We built it together," Adelaide reminded him, as she always did when Wade tried to give her all the credit. "Every bit of it, Wade. Partnership, remember." The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the growth of their children. William grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility and showing a talent for horse breeding that exceeded even Wade's. By 18, he was Wade's true partner in the business, and they began discussing plans to expand further, maybe buy adjacent land that had recently come up for sale. The twins flourished too. Catherine became an accomplished horsewoman, able to outride most of the ranch hands despite her father's grumbling about it being unladylike. Elizabeth's artistic talent developed beautifully, and her drawings and paintings decorated every room of the house. Both girls had inherited Adelaide's musical ability, and the cabin often rang with 3-part harmonies as mother and daughters sang together. Thomas was 5 when Adelaide discovered, to her surprise, that she was pregnant again. She was 41 now, and both she and Wade had assumed their family was complete. But Dr. Morrison confirmed what the missed courses and morning sickness suggested. "Are you happy about it?" Wade asked carefully, knowing this pregnancy would be harder at her age. Adelaide placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "Surprised, definitely. A little scared, I will admit. But yes, Wade, happy. This baby is a gift, just like all our children." Their youngest child, a daughter they named Margaret, arrived on a cold December morning in 1903. The birth was difficult, and Adelaide hemorrhaged badly enough that Dr. Morrison was genuinely worried. But she was strong, strengthened by 20 years of good food and hard work and happiness, and she survived, though recovery took weeks longer than her previous births. Wade barely left her side during those weeks, sleeping in a chair beside their bed, bringing her meals and helping care for baby Margaret when Adelaide was too weak. The older children pitched in too, with William managing the ranch while the twins handled household chores, and Thomas tried his best to help despite being only 6. "I am sorry," Adelaide whispered one night as Wade held her, both of them listening to Margaret sleeping peacefully in the cradle Wade had made. "For what?" Wade asked, genuinely confused. "For scaring you. For being weak when you needed me strong." Wade tightened his arms around her. "Adelaide Vance, you are the strongest person I know. You gave birth to our 5th child and survived complications that would have killed a weaker woman. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing." By spring, Adelaide had recovered completely, and life returned to normal. Margaret grew quickly, a happy baby who rarely fussed and seemed content to be passed from sibling to sibling. William, now 21, announced his engagement to Sarah Mitchell, daughter of a neighboring rancher, and Wade and Adelaide threw an engagement party that brought half the county to their ranch. The wedding took place that summer in the same church where Wade and Adelaide had married 20 years before. Adelaide cried as she watched her firstborn pledge his life to his bride, remembering her own wedding day and how nervous and excited she had been. Wade squeezed her hand, his eyes also damp, both of them feeling the bittersweet passage of time. William and Sarah built a house on the far edge of the ranch property, still part of the family operation but giving them privacy to start their own lives. Within a year, they made Wade and Adelaide grandparents with the birth of their son, James. "I am too young to be a grandmother," Adelaide protested, though she was clearly delighted as she held the tiny baby. "You are the most beautiful grandmother in Arizona," Wade assured her, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they stood over the cradle. "And I am the luckiest grandfather." The twins turned 18 and had suitors lining up, much to Wade's dismay. Catherine shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to help run the ranch rather than marry immediately. And Wade, after recovering from his surprise, agreed to teach her the business side of operations. Elizabeth fell in love with a teacher from Fort McDowell, a kind young man named Robert Crawford, who appreciated her artistic nature, and they married in a quiet ceremony before moving to Tucson, where Robert had accepted a position at a new school. Thomas, now 12, was showing signs of his father's determination and his mother's creativity. He talked about becoming a veterinarian, fascinated by animal medicine and willing to work hard to achieve his dreams. Wade began setting aside money for Thomas's education, determined that his son would have opportunities he himself had never had. And Margaret, at 6 years old, was already singing like an angel, her clear voice echoing through the ranch house and delighting everyone who heard her. Adelaide spent hours teaching her daughter, passing on the techniques and songs that her own mother had taught her decades ago. Wade was 50 now, his dark hair heavily silvered, his face deeply lined by years of sun and hard work. But he was still strong, still rode every day, still looked at Adelaide with the same love that had lit his face 22 years ago when he first heard her sing. Adelaide was 47, her honey-colored hair streaked with gray that she refused to hide, her body marked by 5 pregnancies and years of labor. But her voice remained strong and pure, and when she sang, the years fell away and Wade saw the young woman on the platform, brave and beautiful and singing her heart out for coins. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party, filling the ranch house with friends and neighbors and family. William and Sarah were there with little James, now 4 years old, and terrorizing his older aunts and uncle with endless energy. Elizabeth and Robert had traveled from Tucson, bringing news that they were expecting their first child. Catherine was there with her latest beau, a rancher's son who seemed capable of handling her independent spirit. Thomas had made a banner that read "Happy Anniversary" in careful letters. And Margaret had learned a special song to perform for her parents. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Wade and Adelaide stood on their porch looking out at the ranch they had built. The main house had been expanded twice, now boasting 8 bedrooms and all the modern conveniences available in 1908, including indoor plumbing and electric lights powered by a generator Wade had installed. The barn was massive, housing 30 horses including some of the finest breeding stock in the territory. Pastures stretched in every direction, supporting a herd of nearly 1,000 cattle. Additional houses dotted the property, providing homes for the 15 families who now worked for Vance Ranch. "Remember when we lived in a tent?" Adelaide asked, leaning against Wade's solid warmth. "Remember when you sang for coins and I listened every night, too scared to talk to you?" Wade countered. Adelaide laughed. "You were never scared of anything in your life, Wade Vance." I was terrified of you, Wade admitted. Terrified you would say no when I finally worked up the courage to ask you to dinner. Terrified you would refuse when I proposed. Terrified every day of our marriage that I will not be good enough, that I will fail to give you everything you deserve. Adelaide turned in his arms, looking up at his beloved face. You have given me everything that matters. Love, partnership, children, a home, security, respect. You have spent 25 years proving that you are exactly the man I need, Wade, the only man I will ever need. They kissed as they had thousands of times before, familiar and passionate and sweet. When they pulled apart, Wade rested his forehead against hers. 25 more years. He asked. At least, Adelaide promised. Maybe 50 if we are lucky. The years continued their steady march. Territory status gave way to statehood in 1912, and Arizona became part of the Union proper. Wade and Adelaide attended the celebration in Phoenix, proud to be part of this new chapter in the state's history. William took over primary management of the ranch as Wade's body began to slow down, though Wade still rode and offered advice and enjoyed working with the horses he loved. Sarah gave them 3 more grandchildren, and the main house often rang with the laughter of little ones. Elizabeth had 2 children who inherited her artistic ability, and her home in Tucson was filled with paintings and sculptures. Catherine eventually married a rancher named Joseph Turner, who appreciated her independent spirit, and they built up their own successful operation on land adjacent to Vance Ranch. Thomas achieved his dream of becoming a veterinarian, studying in California before returning to open a practice in Fort McDowell. And Margaret grew into a beautiful young woman whose voice could bring tears to the eyes of everyone who heard her. Margaret was 17 when a traveling theatrical agent heard her singing in church and offered her a contract to tour professionally. The money was substantial, the opportunity genuine, and Margaret was tempted. But she sought her parents' counsel before deciding. What do you think I should do? She asked Adelaide one evening as they sat together on the porch, the place where so many important conversations had happened over the years. Adelaide looked at her youngest daughter, seeing so much of herself at that age. I think you should follow your heart, sweetheart. There is nothing wrong with pursuing a professional career if that is what you truly want, but make sure it is what you want, not just what seems glamorous or exciting. Did you ever regret not pursuing it? Margaret asked. You had the talent, Mother. Everyone says so. Did you regret choosing this instead? She gestured at the ranch, the family, the simple life they had built. Adelaide took her daughter's hand. Not for a single moment, Margaret. I have had a life richer than any stage could have given me, but my path might not be yours. You have opportunities I never had, and you should consider them seriously. In the end, Margaret decided to stay, at least for now. She wanted to finish her education, wanted more time with her family, and was not quite ready to leave the desert she loved for the uncertain life of a touring performer. But knowing she had her parents' support, whatever she decided, made all the difference. Wade turned 60 in 1914, and the family gathered for a celebration that lasted 2 days. All 5 children attended with their spouses and children, filling the ranch house to bursting. 16 grandchildren ranging from infant to teenager created joyful chaos, and Wade sat in his favorite chair watching them all with tears streaming down his weathered face. What is wrong, grandfather? Little James asked, concerned by the tears. Nothing is wrong, son, Wade assured him. I am just happy, so happy I cannot contain it all inside. Adelaide understood completely. She felt the same overwhelming gratitude for the life they had built, the family they had raised, the love that had sustained them through everything. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Wade and Adelaide sat on their porch as they had thousands of times before. The desert was quiet except for the distant sound of cattle and the closer sound of horses moving in their pastures. "You remember that first night?" Wade asked suddenly. "When I first heard you sing, of course," Adelaide replied. "I was so scared, so alone. And then you appeared, this kind cowboy who looked at me like I mattered. You did matter. You still do, more than anything in this world, Adelaide." Wade took her hand, his grip still strong despite his years. "I have never told you this, but that first night I knew. Something inside me recognized you, recognized that you were going to change my life forever." "I felt it too," Adelaide admitted. "Not right away, but soon. The way you protected me without making me feel weak. The way you respected my pride while still offering help. I knew you were different, Wade, special." "We have had a good life," Wade said softly. "The best life," Adelaide corrected. "Not easy, not always, but good, so good." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the stars wheel overhead just as they had 31 years ago when Wade proposed, just as they had thousands of times since. The desert night was cool and perfect, and Adelaide began to hum, then sing, a quiet melody that floated across the ranch. Wade listened, as he had every night for more than 3 decades, his eyes never leaving her face. She was 61 now, her voice not quite as powerful as in her youth but richer, deeper, more resonant with the experiences of a life fully lived. To Wade, she had never been more beautiful, never sounded more perfect. When the song ended, Adelaide turned to find Wade watching her with that familiar look of love and wonder. "Still listening?" she teased gently. "Always," Wade promised. "I will listen to you sing until my dying day, Adelaide Vance, and beyond that if the Lord allows." They made their way to bed eventually, moving slowly with the aches and pains of age but still together, still connected by the love that had sustained them through everything. As they settled under the quilts Adelaide had sewn years ago, Wade pulled her close. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what? For saying yes. For building this life with me. For every song, every smile, every moment of these 31 years. Thank you, Adelaide." "Thank you for listening," Adelaide replied. "For hearing me when I needed it most. For loving me enough to stay. Thank you, Wade." The years continued to pass with increasing speed as they do when one gets older. Wade's health began to decline in his late 60s, his heart not as strong as it had been. Dr. Morrison, now an old man himself, did what he could but admitted there was only so much medicine could do against time. Adelaide refused to let Wade see her fear. She remained strong and cheerful, caring for him with patience and love, making sure he took his medicine and did not overexert himself. The children visited frequently, bringing the grandchildren who delighted Wade even when he was too tired to do much besides sit and watch them play. On a warm evening in May 1921, Wade asked Adelaide to sing for him. She was 73 now, her voice worn by time but still carrying that quality that made hearts ache. She sang the same ballad she had been singing that first night, the song about lost love and prairie winds, and Wade listened with his eyes closed and a smile on his face. When she finished, he opened his eyes and looked at her with such love that Adelaide's breath caught. "Beautiful," he whispered. "You are always so beautiful when you sing." "I love you, Wade Vance," Adelaide said, holding his hand. "I love you too, Adelaide, more than words can say. More than songs can express." He smiled. "But you came close with your songs. You always came close." They sat together as the sun set, painting the desert sky in the colors they had watched together for 38 years. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, a testament to everything they had built. Wade passed away peacefully in his sleep that night. Adelaide beside him as she had been for nearly 4 decades. When she woke to find him gone, Adelaide held his cooling hand and wept, her tears falling on the quilts they had shared for so long. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Wade had been respected and loved throughout the territory, known for his fairness, his hard work, and his devotion to his family. All 5 children stood with Adelaide as they buried Wade on a hill overlooking the ranch, the same spot where he had proposed all those years ago. Adelaide was shattered by the loss, but her children and grandchildren rallied around her. William insisted she move in with him and Sarah, but Adelaide refused. This was her home, the place she and Wade had built together, and she was not leaving it. "I am not ready to give up yet," she told her worried children. "Your father and I made a life here. I want to stay as long as I can to be close to him, to remember." So Adelaide remained in the ranch house, with Margaret moving back home to keep her company. Together, they maintained the house and garden, and Adelaide spent her days writing down the stories of her life with Wade so that future generations would know the man who had changed everything for a desperate young woman singing for coins. She sang less now, the joy muted by grief, but she still sang. For her grandchildren when they visited, for Margaret who encouraged her gently, for the memory of the man who had listened every night for 38 years. Adelaide lived another 7 years, years filled with new great-grandchildren, and the continued prosperity of Vance Ranch under William's leadership. She saw Margaret finally accept that theatrical contract at 28, watching with pride and bittersweetness, as her youngest daughter achieved the success Adelaide herself had never pursued. On a cool October evening in 1928, Adelaide sat on her porch wrapped in a shawl, watching the sunset paint the sky. Margaret had gone into Fort McDowell for supplies, and Adelaide was alone with her memories and the desert wind. She began to sing, her voice cracked and worn at 83 but still carrying remnants of its former beauty. She sang the ballad she had been singing that first night, the song that had drawn Wade to her all those years ago. And as the sun sank below the horizon, Adelaide closed her eyes and felt a profound sense of peace. They found her there the next morning, passed away quietly in her chair, a slight smile on her weathered face. In her lap was a letter she had been writing to her children, and the final lines read, "I've lived a life beyond my wildest dreams. I found love when I was lost, built a home when I was homeless, and raised a family that is my greatest achievement. Your father was the best man I ever knew, and I am ready to be with him again. Do not grieve too long. Remember instead that we had 38 beautiful years together and 7 more in memory. That is more than most people ever get. I love you all. Keep singing, keep loving, keep building. That is what your father would want. That is what I want too." They buried Adelaide beside Wade on the hill overlooking the ranch, and as the family gathered to say goodbye, Margaret sang the ballad her mother had taught her, the song that had started everything. Her voice carried across the desert, strong and pure, a testament to the woman who had sung for coins and found love in the most unexpected place. Vance Ranch continued to prosper through the generations, passed down through William's line, and then his children and grandchildren. The story of Wade and Adelaide became family legend, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires, a reminder of where they had come from and the values that had built their legacy. The house remained standing, expanded and modernized, but still recognizably the cabin Wade had built with his own hands. The hill where they were buried became a family shrine, tended carefully and visited often by descendants who never knew them but felt their presence nonetheless. And sometimes, on quiet desert evenings when the wind blows just right, people swear they can hear singing carrying across the ranch, a woman's voice pure and sweet, and the sound of spurs jingling softly as if someone is listening, always listening, captivated by the music that first brought two souls together in the wild heart of Arizona territory so many years ago. The love story that began with a desperate woman singing for coins and a cowboy who listened every night had become something timeless, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of partnership, and the enduring nature of true love. Wade and Adelaide's story lived on, inspiring generation after generation to take chances on love, to build rather than coast, to listen for the voice that speaks to their heart and have the courage to answer when it calls. Their great-great-grandchildren still run Vance Ranch, now one of the most successful operations in Arizona. The piano Adelaide played still sits in the parlor, maintained carefully and played often. Wade's first saddle hangs in the barn, preserved as a reminder of humble beginnings. And on the mantel of the main house sits a battered tin cup, the same one Adelaide used to collect coins all those years ago, a symbol of how far they came and the love that made it all possible. The story of the singer and her cowboy became more than just family history. It became part of Fort McDowell's identity, retold in schools and written about in local histories. The bench where they used to sit during courtship was preserved and marked with a plaque. The church where they married added a stained glass window in their honor, depicting a woman with a guitar and a man in a cowboy hat, their hands joined beneath a desert sky. But the truest memorial to their love was not any physical marker or preserved object. It was the family they created, the values they instilled, the example they set of what marriage and partnership could be at its best. Their children had learned from watching them that love required work and commitment, that romance was not just grand gestures but daily kindness, that building a life together meant facing challenges as a team. Those lessons passed down through generations, creating a family known for strong marriages and deep commitments. The Vance name became synonymous with integrity and devotion, all because a cowboy had the courage to approach a desperate young woman and offer help without expectation, and because that woman had the wisdom to recognize genuine kindness when she saw it. In the end, Adelaide and Wade's story was not remarkable because of dramatic events or extraordinary circumstances. It was remarkable because of its ordinary beauty, the way two people from difficult backgrounds found each other and built something lasting through hard work, mutual respect, and unwavering love. They proved that happy endings were possible even after devastating loss, that new beginnings could spring from the darkest moments, and that sometimes the most important decision you can make is to take a chance on love when it appears, no matter how improbable or inconvenient the timing. The cowboy who listened and the woman who sang for coins had found in each other exactly what they needed: partnership, passion, purpose, and a love that lasted not just until death but beyond it, living on in memory and legacy and the countless ways their union continued to shape the world long after they were gone. Their story was, in the truest sense, a happily ever after, not because their life was perfect or easy, but because they faced it together with open hearts and unwavering commitment, building something beautiful that would outlast them both and inspire generations yet to come.